Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we'll be doing a box office preview for the next couple of weeks, which sees the release of West Side Story 2021, a film that everyone was asking for, and the long-awaited release of Spider-Man No Way Home, which of course has been making the rounds in the news media because of the incredible pre-sale tickets for the film and how many records it has been breaking in pre-sales. But as I've mentioned in a previous video, pre-sales do not always tell the entirety of the story. That does not mean that I do not think that the film is going to be successful, but what I do think it means is that if we're going to base everything on pre-sales, we always just need to remind ourselves of a little film like that of Solo: A Star Wars Story, which also broke records, which was also, or not necessarily breaking records, but was also tracking ahead of much more successful films, including even Black Panther, which was one of the most successful domestic films of all time, but still ended up being a financial flop. Now, that's not likely going to be the case for Spider-Man No Way Home, but it does, I think, put things into perspective that pre-sales are only a part of the overall story. Before going into what the projected numbers are for this film and what it means for the long-range total number for the film, please make sure that you smash the like button, loud that fire button if you're watching on Odyssey, and also smash the rumble button. And also make sure you subscribe to the channel with the bell notification on. That way you never time a video or live stream goes live on the channel. So first, starting off with the film coming out this week, which is West Side Story, which is projected to make $14 to $22 million in its opening weekend, with a total range of $55 to $85 million in its entire domestic run. That is abysmal. This is a Disney 20th Century Studios production. This is a film that also cost $100 million to make, meaning that the break-even point for this number is relatively high, a lot higher than the number it is projected to make domestically. And if one sees a typical maybe 50-50 or 60-40 split with this and the international market, it is not likely to make its money back. What I do find interesting is that it's only releasing the film in 2,800 screens, so clearly they don't think the film is going to be all that successful. That is not going to really reach out to a lot of people. If they did, they would be putting it out in a lot more theaters than that. That is almost limited theatrical run levels there in a market where Disney has been notorious for putting out their films in well over 4,000 screens. It is kind of odd to me that they're putting a Steven Spielberg musical in that few screens. Now, to be fair, we also can look to the history of musicals during this pandemic season and can understand why Disney might be trying to do this. And a big part of that is, of course, the fact that these musicals have just not done well. One needs only look to films like Dear Evan Hansen or In the Heights, and to see that those films really did struggle to do much of anything. In the Heights added to that because of its day-and-date release on HBO Max, whereas Dear Evan Hansen just never got off the ground and ended up getting pulled from theaters relatively quickly in the early goings because of how poorly it actually did at the box office. Now, this is a Steven Spielberg movie. It is a pretty well-known entity by the name West Side Story. Again, a well-known story. It's a classic film. However, as I mentioned in the very beginning, I don't really know exactly who is asking for anyone to remake this film, let alone Steven Spielberg, who has not made the best films in his more recent years, especially looking to films like Ready Player One. But kind of does then surprise me that this film is not expected to make a lot of money and could essentially be yet another financial failure and financial flop for Disney, which, let's be honest here, has basically just been kind of the line, has kind of been the company line since the beginning of the pandemic, when with Onward, they lost over $200 million, and they've been losing money on almost every single one of their box office releases, just looking at the box office numbers alone. So West Side Story does not seem to be any different of a story there. What does seem to be a bit of a different story, though, is what's going on with Sony. And yes, I do say Sony because 75% or so of the box office receipts are going to go to Sony in this Sony Marvel mashup. Marvel is going to get about 25%, so Disney will get about 25% of the entire gross of this movie, which is likely going to cross the $1 billion mark and be the first $1 billion film during the pandemic times, and could actually be the highest grossing Spider-Man film in recent memory, possibly even of all time. Now, I have not done the full comparison, adjusting for inflation, comparing it to the original films, but what I can say is that at least of the Tom Holland era, there is a decent chance for this film to actually be the highest grossing, which once again kind of would throw a wrench in the narrative of the whole, oh, well, it's not doing well because of the pandemic. And yet certain films have been able to break through that and do better than even some of their previous releases, or at the very least start off in different markets stronger, or do better in certain markets altogether than previous releases if they were a part of a franchise. And of course, that has been a major sticking point that I have mentioned several times before, that maybe it's the movie, maybe it's the story, maybe it's the IP that is going to drive people to go see a film, and not necessarily the fact that it's just the pandemic that is keeping people from going to see it. And how can we tell that? Well, Spider-Man No Way Home is right now projected to make $190 to $250 million in its opening weekend, meaning that they are expecting this film to make over $200 million in its opening weekend domestically. Not only would this be unheard of for pandemic times, but that would just be a strong opening in general. Their long-range forecast has the film making $520 to $690 million by the end of its run. Just as a bit of a reminder here, films like Black Panther, which, as I said, is one of the most successful domestic runs of all time, made north of $700 million in its domestic run. So the fact that you have a film like this, which obviously it's Spider-Man, it's a very popular property, making those kinds of numbers, as I said, definitely seems to throw a wrench in the entire pandemic narrative. Maybe it's that people actually want to go see this film. Maybe it's because this film seems to, based on the trailers, be offering things that people are actually wanting to go out to go see. And I don't give credit here to Marvel because guess what? This is still a Sony property. They're still going to get the vast majority of the net gain, net profits. Now, we don't know exactly what kind of net gain, net profits the movie is going to make because we don't have an official budget. Based on the previous releases of Spider-Man, it likely costs somewhere around $200 million based on the names of the people who are in this film that we have found out who are confirmed to be in this film, and some names that have not yet even been confirmed yet either. But obviously, because of just how huge this movie is, I imagine it'll probably cost closer to the $200 million mark, meaning the break-even point for this film will be very, very high. But if these numbers hold, these numbers alone would be enough for it to break even, and this is without even taking into account the international numbers, which we all know have been kind of a mess since the pandemic has started, right? There's been some films like No Time to Die, which have been able to make north of $600 million internationally, whereas most other films have just fallen off the mark because of various lockdowns and other crazy measures going on around the entire world. Needless to say, this film is expected to be a massive hit, a massive success. All the while, Matrix Resurrections, the film that definitely no one has been asking for, is expected to, let's just say, be a financial flop. Now, again, people will try and say, yeah, well, this is one of the last films that's going to be the HBO Max day and date release. Yes, but to say that a Matrix film is going to make a paltry $35 to $50 million, even with HBO Max being available as an option there, and also just looking to the trailer that has not, again, the trailer that's been terrible, the poster that looks like it was made randomly in 2 minutes by a fan, I think that anyone who's going to be honest here can probably guess that Warner Brothers is going to have yet another stinker on its hand here. But again, still a little bit early on this one. This is a few weeks out still. But Spider-Man No Way Home, of course, is the big news of the day with just, again, how massive amount of money it is expected to make. Now, notice these jumps here, 41%, 34%. These numbers are based on the pre-sales. Because of the number of seats that are being sold in the pre-sales, because of the records that are being broken in pre-sales, that is what is being a part of the Box Office Pro metric to make these types of guesses. Now, the reason why I point that out is because I would not be surprised if two things happen. Either one, the film matches these expectations, or two, if the film comes well under these expectations, for a couple of different reasons. One, because this is a film that I just know a lot of people are excited for, right? I've seen this in the comment section. I've seen this on social media. There are people that are genuinely excited for this movie because people just love the character of Spider-Man, and people are excited for people like Alfred Molina and others to be brought back into the Spider-Man universe. And I think that alone, that nostalgia, which as we all know, nostalgia is a very powerful drug, is going to be able to bring out a lot of people. However, as I've mentioned previously, pre-sales do not tell the entire story. Pre-sales do not turn into account or make for account of people showing up on the day of release, which is a much bigger factor into how well or how not well a film actually does in the box office in its opening weekend and its long term. Now, again, I think that this film will probably have a pretty strong day of performance, day of people showing up to buy tickets as well, but we'll have to, of course, wait for the actual numbers to come out. So, again, two narratives, two stories that could really happen here. Either it underperforms, in which case I will point to the fact that this is something that is common. This is something that happens a lot because pre-sales do not tell the entire story, or it actually meets or exceeds expectations because of how hyped people are for this film. There has not been this much hype around a film since the entirety of the pandemic actually started. Again, Spider-Man has been a very popular character for a very long time, and of all the studios, Sony has actually been one of the best in its marketing campaign, has been one of the best in getting people to go see their movies, which is why the vast majority of their films to be released have actually made profit, and in the case of some films like Venom 2, have made well over $100 million in net profits. And so, I think that Sony is definitely the right company for this. I don't know if it necessarily would be doing this well if it was a purely Marvel product. Not because of this movie necessarily, but because of the fact that if Marvel had complete control of this character and complete control of this universe, I think that people would have been checking out a long time ago, because I kind of just shudder to think about what direction they would have taken Spider-Man if they had had full control at this point in time. So even though Sony may not be the best of companies in the world, I think that if anyone is going to be able to at least make the film profitable, Sony is in a much better position than Marvel Studios, than Disney is, as Disney has had flop after flop after flop coming out this year, whereas Sony has been able to make returns on their investments. And just to show some of these numbers, as I said, with West Side Story, which is the newer film to come out again later on this weekend, $100 million is the budget for that movie, which again, that is a lot of money for this film to make up, and it's not expected to make a lot of money back on its return. As you can see, this is being reported over at Variety. So again, that's the source on that. Spider-Man No Way Home does not have an official budget as of this video, but compared to other films like Spider-Man Far From Home, which cost $160 million, made $1.1 billion, and Spider-Man Homecoming, which cost $175 million, $880 million by the end of its run, I think you can see why I am expecting that this movie, No Way Home, will not only exceed that of the Tom Holland $1.1 billion film, but also be able to probably cost north of $200 million because of just how large this film is. But anyway, what are your thoughts about it? Do you think Spider-Man No Way Home is going to be able to get north of $200 million in its domestic opening? And do you think that this film will be the first billion-dollar film of the pandemic? I don't see this film being able to get to the $2 billion mark. I think some people have been asking, is this going to be the biggest film of all time? I don't really think that there is enough out there to kind of indicate that at this point. However, I think there is enough data at this point to definitely confirm that there's a 99% chance that this movie is going to easily cross the billion-dollar mark by the end of its run, just by looking at these domestic numbers. Now, of course, we will be following these domestic numbers when this film comes out in a couple of weeks, how it is matching up to it, if it is matching up to it, and what the first 2 weeks tell us, because as I always say, the first 2 weeks tell us a lot about what the overall end game, for lack of better expression, will be for any given film. But what are your thoughts about this? Also, West Side Story. Do you care about West Side Story at all? Are you surprised that this is going to be yet another financial failure for Disney at this point based on the numbers that we have? Let me know. And also, of course, I did mention The Matrix. Do you think The Matrix has any chance of doing anything? Let me know that as well. Please make sure that you smash the like button, loud the fire button, smash the rumble button. It really does mean a lot. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my December Patreon Subscribe Star and Locals members. Animation commentator Brandon, Brian P., Christopher Bowman, Dolores Ed, Dion, Father Christopher Miller, Hail to You Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Hannibal Grimm, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, Jacob Juice, Jeff Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Gomer Kyles 79, Laura, The Modern Major General's Story, Mike Jackson ×4, Mitch Dunaway, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mr. Peabody, Mondo Spieler, On to June, Orange Chat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Ullen, Stan Andrian, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, and Tina Bojan, and of course, the Empress of the Universe, Tina B. Thank you very much for being my Patreon members. And for my Subscribe Star members, UAB Mad Dog, Mike Jackson, Storm Tracker, The R, Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, Stan 4, John B., Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod, the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man. Thank you very much for supporting me on Subscribestar. And to my 4 members over on Locals.com, Kara Tharp, UAB Mad Dog, once again, Mike Jackson, Bifford a Hobbit, and Robert Barnes. Thank you for supporting me on Locals, and if you want to have your name shouted out at the end of every video and live stream, check out the top link in the video description below. It's called Willow, or w.lo, Willow link. It'll bring you to all of my social media platforms and also to all of the various other locations that you can support the channel. You can get access to things like giveaways, where I do giveaways of 4K films, 4K steelbooks, digital codes, all kinds of stuff every single month. Also, there's a level where you get access to all of that, plus an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger, where you also get to ask questions that we will answer on every episode of the podcast. And at the final level, you also have the ability, the Chosen of Valhalla level, you have the ability to have all of that, plus in your first month, get a free t-shirt of your choice, any color, sent anywhere in the world, and also you get to be featured once a month on the Chosen of Valhalla live stream featured on the main channel. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, check out the link in the description. You're all amazing and beautiful people. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.